Africa is still hopeful that it can avoid being placed on a grey list related to the country's financial regulations. A two-day session of the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, is underway in Paris. Countries are being assessed on whether they have adequate monitoring capabilities to counter money laundering, corruption and financing of terrorism. Now, South Africa's Acting Director General in National Treasury, Ismail, is joining us now from the venue of the meeting of FATF. Mr. Momoniat, thank you very much for your time. The meeting has just ended. I see you're seated inside the venue there. Can you just begin there with a general question before I ask you others? How has the meeting gone?
No, the meeting's been quite a good one. But let me point out that there's no discussion on South Africa's grey listing at this meeting. It was just the standard items at the FATF plenary, which they do 3 times a year. We'll be up on the agenda next year in February, which is the next plenary.
Okay, that's going to come in February. That's when FATF will decide our fate as a country. But the assessment processes are underway now, I guess. How are we doing?
No, absolutely. Look, the assessment processes, obviously what we're doing is all at home, getting all the relevant agencies to go through item by item the steps that need to be taken. And let me say, look, firstly, the FATF process, if we were able to deal with the issues, it will be in our own interest because it will improve our capability to deal with financial crimes. And there's 2 elements to that. Firstly, there's what's called technical compliance. And for that, it's our legislative framework. They identified 20 or 40 weaknesses that we're dealing with through 2 bills that are currently in Parliament, which we are hopeful, in fact, reasonably certain that Parliament will pass them before the end of the year and they'll come into effect. So that will be a huge mountain that we'll have climbed, but it's not going to be enough. We then also need to show the second element where there are 11 what they call effectiveness measures or immediate outcomes. We have to make sure that in all of those we've made some progress.
So we've also seen, well, that's on the legislation side, and you seem pretty much confident that before the end of this year, those laws will be passed by Parliament to improve our standing in this regard. But we've also witnessed a spate of seizures and charges and arrests recently related to the private sector and the public sector by the law enforcement agencies. Is this a little, too too late?
No, not at all. I don't think it's ever too late, and I don't think it's too little. I think that some of the cases now really give us hope that we're getting on and dealing with all those cases of state corruption, private sector corruption, or fraud. That our capability clearly has increased, and we are reaping the rewards of the new leadership which President Ramaphosa put in place in 2018. It's taken them time, but I think we can show that there's been consistent progress that's been made and that our agencies are acting without fear or favor. And I think those things are going to help with the effectiveness outcomes in certain categories.
Yeah. Now, at a broader level, Mr. Momoniat, let's just take other countries that have been grey listed, like Turkey, for example, after being grey listed, saw a steep decline in foreign investment, and that led to a ripple effect, of course, on its economy. Should we as South Africa not be preparing instead for ourselves? Should we be not preparing for a grey listing? I saw Business Leadership South Africa the other week saying there's an 85% likelihood we will be grey listed.
Yeah, let me get to the grey listing. Certainly, it's going to be an uphill task to prevent the grey listing. And, I'm focusing on, I don't think anyone outside knows whether it's 85% or 80% or 70%. But let's take the figure of 85-15. We are trying to get that 15%. It's still possible. It's going to be tough. And in terms of impact on investment and so on, I think grey listing is certainly not good for the country. But if we can show that we made substantial progress, and the grey listing is not related, for example, to how our banks function and so on, I think that we'll be able to mitigate the impact, but more importantly, to figure out how we can get out of it quickly. But look, we're not there yet. We are preparing to not even get there, to prevent the grey listing, which I'm reasonably hopeful and that we will prevent, because I think we've made and we will make a lot of progress by January next year.
And maybe by January next year, you and I can have another conversation here on eNCA as to how far that process has gone. Hopefully, that cautious optimism you are expressing will come to fruition. Thank you very much for your time. That's the acting Director General of National Treasury, Mr. Ismail Momoniat, who's just in Paris now, attending that normal kind of meeting of the Financial Action Task Force. Our turn will be in February next year. We'll revisit this issue as we get closer to that time as to how South Africa will manage to avoid being grey listed, because the implications are huge if you do get grey listed. It affects all kinds of facets of our financial and economic activity, including at the individual level, not just at the sovereign level.